We know from the toe tag in the last video that her name was Barbara. But what an obscene toe tag on a frozen cadaver languishing unclaimed for weeks in a local morgue can't tell us is that she was, in her own words, evangelical about living, really living.
Yes, we all take our own pathways, some very purposeful, and the more surprising and alarming, oh, what the hell, why not? But you know, John, something worth keeping in mind are the frightened and incapacitated who have not moved from spot 1 to spot 2 in a lifetime. I suppose I am some evangelic about really living. I witness too many people stretching endless days into complacencies that kill them. You can't always turn that around, and it breaks my heart and keeps me at the trying. Oh, John, isn't being alive wonderful? What on earth went wrong with those who are not and could have been? Well, we know that too. You have to make your happiness. I wish I had realized decades ago how much choosing was my own province.
And if Barbara's remarkable life was defined by anything, it was by choosing, chiseling, and shaping her own trajectory.
Having met the indictment in grade school that I would have to make up my mind what I wanted to be when I grew up, and finding no use for specializing in light of myriad choices that kept appearing, I instead proceeded to test myself in many careers, doing and learning much in the process. That decision, choosing how to conduct my life, it was very simple and very fast.
My name is Geraldine Ferraro.
One day, when I was press secretary to Congresswoman Geraldine Ferraro, I asked myself if I ever wanted to run for political office. No, I did not. I had no interest in power or governing or sticking to one job more than 2 years tops. What did I want? Writing, painting and art, endless experience. As far as I could see, a checkered career was about the best thing on earth. I could live my life as I saw fit to live it, and the more checkers, the better.
And what a delightfully checkered life Barbara carved out for herself. Embarking at age 17 on a cross-country drive in her father's baby blue 1962 Sunbeam Alpine convertible, no less, black leather interior with wood dash, driving solo from California to Goddard College in Vermont. Then on to London to attend St. Martin's School of Art. Still a teenager, she hops a train to explore Berlin, Poland, Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev. All this at the height of the Cold War.
I am inclined to see potential for every living being to expand and change. I believe that if we but allow it, we are altered by every experience we have. I have only realized relatively recently, the past 2 decades maybe, that not everyone wants to grow, and it breaks my heart, and it's very hard to pull off a reversal in someone determined to decline the invitation to the dance.
Back in the States, deftly juggling careers and lifestyles, she settles into an apartment in Brooklyn, up above the storefront headquarters of the militant Black Panthers.
Living above the Black Panthers was no particular treat, but it is cool to remember in the now distant future. Every now and then I'd pass one or more of these guys in the entranceway. These gangsters, what a bunch, and so full of themselves. They cut me a lot of slack. I don't know if it was my motherhood, infant child status, or so firmly working class waitressing, or that I kept so many animals, or what, or being an artist. It was a universal and entirely extraordinary thing to New York City. Being an artist was kind of a holy to poor, unschooled, roughneck kids. There was an aura connected to it. In the whole time I painted at Coney Island, and believe me, that was one dangerous hellhole. I was never bothered by any of the gangs, nor was any of my work ever injured. It was a rough neighborhood, lots of junkies. Front windows of our houses would get smashed, and houseplants grabbed that could be fenced for a couple of bucks. Gunpoint robberies, beatings, rough, brazen stuff. Criminals would walk up behind a guy walking to work and thrust their hands right into his trouser pockets while they were walking. Grab, punch, run. The war zone. It was exhausting. Years ago, around 3 a.m. in Brooklyn, there was a wilding coming up my street from the Gowanus housing projects. The same place idiot Spike Lee and Beyoncé's husband Jay-Z are so romantic about. At least 200, maybe 300 kids from 11 to 18 years old covered the sidewalks and streets and moved up it like locusts, breaking everything in their path. Front windows, cars, throwing rocks, armed with pipes and baseball bats. I'd woken from the roar. They were half a block from the front of my house and heading another 2 blocks up to Atlantic Avenue and its stores. I leaned out my second-story window, watching. Suddenly, a kid about 15 was in front of my downstairs window, arm cocked and his hand full of a large brick. I leaned out further and roared down at him in my best John Wayne imitation. "Drop that, you son of a bitch!" For some reason he did. For some reason nobody else noticed. For some reason they kept going up the hill. Thanks, Duke. I half wonder if I didn't leap into the center of so many different storms in New York nearly against my will, to learn and experience things unknown to me, and have now returned to my more natural state of recluse. I tested society and the closeness of my fellow man, and found it wanting. Au revoir. How I love being on my own.
On her own. Thrills and adrenaline rushes and epiphanies a dime a dozen in the mean streets of Brooklyn. Barbara's resume soon includes waitressing and bartending at bohemian bars in Greenwich Village, as well as the only known female at the time so employed, swinging in the breeze on a scaffold, painting billboards over Times Square.
I have had thoroughly miserable jobs working for people who would have benefited the world by being institutionalized, but never with painting. The first job I had, where I was getting paid for holding a loaded brush in my hand all day, was on billboard. 5 days a week, I was swinging in the breeze on scaffolds, 10 to 25 stories up above Times Square, New York City's 42nd Street Mecca, having the time of my life. Coney Island the same. We did cigarettes and booze and Broadway openings. John Belushi's 1944, The Wiz with young Michael Jackson, The Rolling Stones' 1973 World Tour, A Bottle of Dewar's sinking into the Manhattan skyline sunset. You had to work fast. We mixed all our colors on the scaffold, pots of pigment, Japan dryer, linseed oil, and benzene. Eyes were painted with 4-inch brushes. The standard billboards were 30 by 60 feet. Big. Sweet. Whether I was painting dripping ice cream cones or steaming hot dogs, oh God, it was incredible. Color and paint and terps and brushes. I was on fire all the time. The last job was 25 stories up. The street temp was 18 degrees, and it was a windy November, and I decided they weren't paying me enough for all that and quit. I did that 5 days a week and then tended bar Friday nights through Sundays. It was on West Broadway, which was not then but became Soho, and a crappy, little, smelly, delightful place called the Barnabas Rex, run by an overly dramatic Southern girl who liked violent boyfriends. Local artists and bikers were drawn to it. It was always incredibly crowded and lively. You cannot begin to imagine, or maybe you can, the amount of crap I was subjected to by the artists who came in and cleared bar space to study and fill out Guggenheim and MoMA grant forms, filled with ridicule for me because I was making commercial art. Not one of them with an ounce of guts, all looking for some free ride.
True to her word, Barbara resisted complacency and constantly sought fresh opportunities. Still in her mid-20s, she writes William F. Buckley, Jr. a letter asking to paint his portrait. Because, she says, I had decided I wanted to paint portraits of interesting people I admired. Buckley's secretary responds, and they work out a commission. He visits her studio apartment for sessions, and Barbara paints while balancing her infant son on her lap. She got hired as a news writer at CBS, ABC, and Fox TV, and became press secretary to Geraldine Ferraro, New York Congresswoman, who later became the Democratic nominee for vice president in the 1984 election.
I made incredible money in the after-TV news, also very lucrative with my own house painting and plastering work. Averaged $8,000 a month in the 80s. Took off all the time I needed, set my own prices and hours, had more work than I could handle, and loved it. Wish I'd saved some. When I was at CBS, my friend Chris Borgen asked if I wanted to see a burned body. He'd been covering the murder that morning, a very young prostitute, a girl found by the rail tracks, stabbed or shot, set afire, out in nowhere. I thought, well, I should look, and I did. I felt such pity for her. Chris was a singularly sensitive soul who wrote poetry for the idiots at CBS, which made the city love him. The story didn't get aired with pictures, but I'll never forget it. Being confronted by death is not a bad thing. There are emotions inside us that need tapping, and we are formed by our experiences, by all we allow.
Barbara was taking seriously her desire to have a checkered career, to test herself. The more checkers, the better. But she approached life eyes wide open and was not immune to doubt and self-criticism. Motherhood in particular threw her for a loop. Looking back years later, she laments her shortcomings.
Many years ago, when I was in my 20s, a time long in the rearview mirror when I think of all the life since, I interrupted a walk with my dog Princey to sit down on old border barricades of an empty lot in Brooklyn. It was past midnight, intensely quiet, a moonless early spring night of impossibly bright stars, and a night I have never forgot. Princey was a collie shepherd mix. I found him months before, racing on the city's streets from some cruelty with a bum's old rope for a leash around his neck. Scared and cowed and desperate and starving, and took him in. Somewhere in the dark behind me, by many blocks, was my apartment on Atlantic Avenue. I lived on the second floor of a 3-story walk-up, small building. There was no heat. The newly widowed Greek landlady drove in from Jersey to collect the rents, but never filled the boiler. I used to run the hot water in the shower to make steam. Somehow, there was endless hot water. Turn on the oven and open the door. It was bone cold, that place. A Puerto Rican family lived above with 2 beautiful daughters. The father worked in the X-Lax factory half a mile away. The Black Panthers rented the storefront on the ground floor below, filled with black uniforms, army boots, guns, bullet-filled bandoliers, pot and incense in the air. Secretive 24-hour conspiring, meetings, music, muscle, and talk of revolutions. The apartment was a good size. Most were in those days. Lots of light from Atlantic Avenue through big windows. In the back, the kitchen window could be opened onto the bit of roof of the room on the ground floor that extended into the crusty backyard. My apartment was filled with rescued cats, sequestered in what would have been 1 bedroom, and a new room of chicken wire I constructed in the kitchen corner, and 3 dogs. And my child, less than 6 months old, my Trevor, left sleeping in his crib this night, so many nights, while I finished the endless day. Mornings came early and nights ended late. I waitressed, tended bar, went to Coney Island on weekends to earn sign painting money. I'd wake my little boy from sleep before dawn to dress and bring him, sometimes unfed, to the babysitter, and picked him up, hot against me from sleep in a strange crib by 10 or 11 at night to bring him home. And lucky to have that in an age unknown to daycare. There were clothes to hand wash in the sink, his and mine. Animals to feed, the dogs to walk. I'd even found a rooster on the sidewalk, a refugee from cockfighting, and was trying to keep him alive in a closet fronted by a door I'd made of chicken wire. And it was during these months in that place that I started and finished a commission of a life-size portrait of William F. Buckley, Jr. in the front room that doubled as my bedroom and my studio and my everything else. Because of the animals, to not be found out, have them seized and killed, and us evicted, I kept the whole place clean and odorless as possible. That was its own career, I'll tell you that. And through much of those early years like that, I never understood my child's crying, because I did not allow crying for myself. The life I was in, I had somehow made, and I was in it, and the child with me, in it. And I didn't know why I hurt when I hurt, or was angry or confused, or happy when any of those things hit. I'm not sure I questioned it. I had no idea how to care for either of us. I only knew I wanted to learn it for myself, and being taken care of or married was not what I could stand, not deep in me, not that sacrifice. But I had put myself in therapy to reach it all, a slow, grueling, and liberating process. I had a rare and precious independence in all this isolating exclusion from convention. That I knew. And in that night out under the benediction of starlight, on that empty Brooklyn square, feet of dust and quiet, with Princey sitting beside me and welcoming my hugs and thoughtful of my agony, I cried out to the universe, "When will my time come? When will my time for painting endlessly, with all the supplies I need, in a wonderful studio and house, all safe and warm? A busy kitchen filled with food and color and life. A wonderful man who loves me and will raise my child with me. When will my time come to paint and draw and write my books? How do I make that happen? I don't know how to make that happen. And weep I did.
Fast forward 2 decades. Barbara, the bohemian artist, is living wild in a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And her estranged, grown-up 23-year-old Trevor is killed in a car accident after partying with friends back in New York. His father waits 3 months before telling her, and she goes insane with grief and guilt.